Welcome to the Ortho Joe Show, a joint production of the Journal of Bone and Joint Surgery and Ortho Evidence. In our world, orthopedic research is king, and current topics from our respective publications are analyzed weekly. Here is Mohit Bhandari from Ortho Evidence and Marc Swinkowski from the Journal of Bone and Joint Surgery.
Well, good morning, Mo. It's been, I think, a difficult night for you with some late night meetings. So I'm sure you've got your cup. I certainly have mine.
Oh,
I have to head over to the OR after this recording and help my colleague, Dr. Dave Pauly, head of spine surgery here, do a revision sacroiliac joint fixation. So I definitely need.
Oh, you need a couple of cups. You need a couple of cups. Get them going.
Yeah. So it's great to be on the line here with two COA presidents, a past president and the current president, individuals who are in major leadership roles, both in Canada and internationally. And the topic today is innovation. And it came to us basically through email contact. And I just want to remind the audience that you can send us comments or criticisms or throw rocks at us or suggest new topics. Just go to orthojoe@jbjs.org and let us know what you think. So Mo, I'll hand it over to you to introduce our expert consultant today.
Sure. So welcome, Dr. Ed Harvey. And I suspect many of our viewers are aware of some of the work he's done. Certainly there's going to be individuals that have worked with him pretty closely. But Dr. Harvey represents a surgeon scientist at the very core. He's a tenured professor at McGill, but what he's also done in many ways is taught our community what it really means to be a surgeon innovator. So I'm going to have Ed maybe give us more explanation of what that term means. But first of all, welcome Ed to this morning's Ortho Joe.
Oh, I'm so happy to be here with two of my mentors.
Oh yeah. Well, I don't want to date. Listen, I don't want to date myself, but Dr. Harvey was actually my examiner on my Royal College examinations, and I remember being particularly worried because I would answer a question, he'd look at me and say, "That's it," and I'd say, "Okay, I've just failed this question. But luckily, he passed me, so I'm very, very, very happy with that. I'll never forget that. But here's the worst part: he looks younger than me, so I don't get it. Like I'm aging, and he's just looking younger. But anyways. I think it's those 100-kilometer bike rides you guys seem to do. Yeah. But anyways, okay, I digress. But let me go back to, I think most of our viewers understand the concept of what a surgeon scientist is. I think, that's been well understood. I think we also understand what a surgeon educator is. I think many of our listeners, would fit one of those categories, if not in some of them both. But I think what's less understood, Ed, is the surgeon innovator. And can you explain what's that phenotype? What's different about that individual compared to the other two?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm not sure it's so different for most surgeons and orthopedic surgeons in particular. We spend the whole day in the OR in the clinic thinking about how to do things better. The innovation part is just pushing it forward to the end. We invent every day. Invention's a small part of innovation, I think, but understanding what it means to take your ideas to fruition is what makes an innovator. People often confuse invention with innovation. I'll give you an example. A good invention is the airplane. So the airplane was an invention. It wasn't really an innovation until we were able to put 4.2 billion passengers per year on these tubes and fly them around the world and change the way business and travel was done. And that was the innovative part. So it's something that changes society or a process that's important to you. And seriously, every day we figure out something that would be better. Now, is it worth anything? I mean, is cutting a corner in the OR an innovative process that you can bring to commercialization? Maybe not. But there are things definitely you think of and you see every day that you say, I wish they would have made that a little better. I wish that, that plate was blue instead of pink. I'm just using a funny example, but it's that's what we do. Now, the person that can take that out and say, okay, how do I change that? That's the person who becomes a surgeon innovator. It's hard. It's not easy to be a surgeon innovator. It's easier to be a surgeon inventor. I spent first half of my career inventing things, accumulating patents in my lab, and wondering why nothing came of it. No one was swooping in to buy things and make my lab rich. That didn't work out. So then I just got a little tired of that and said, okay, I have to learn how to process that out. And part of that is kind of word of mouth, and it's a lot easier now. I mean, we started a program at McGill where we had residents taught in 3 disciplines. So they went and got a master's degree in innovation, which included an engineering school, a medical school, and a business school. And we had them go to classes in 3 different universities and still get a degree. And I think that was innovative. And that the people coming out of that, now we're generating startups at an increasing rate. There's 5 to 10 startups a year, at least in the first stages coming out of that program. So you can teach it. It is a little different than when we currently think of as invention, but so that's why it's a little hard to do. It's not easy.
Let me jump in and just get a bit more clarification. So I think what happens, and you're absolutely right. There's probably, I don't know, tens of thousands of ideas every single day in orthopedic surgical clinics and ORs around the world, right? For sure. I'm underestimating that. But what makes someone decide to actually act, right? Because, everyone says, oh, that's such an obvious thing. I imagined it, but to create something is actually, moving it forward. What, from your own personal experience, what has been that difference? Is it the idea that people think that I have to invent? In other words, it's not worth even trying. This is such a small thing, no one's going to care. And should we care about every small thing? And, through an approach that says if we make a number of small, quote, innovations, we can actually change the world? Or what's that, what made you act? Was it just, you were just born with it, or can it be taught?
Yeah, good question. Definitely, I was not born with it, as Marc can attest to. I'm not the kind of person that goes out and shakes hands and say, can you please support me? I'm more the person that does something, right? So in my case, and it's not the same in every case, like I said, now we're turning out people who innovate at a younger and younger age, right out of school. But in my case, it was just frustration at seeing things not come through the pipeline the way I thought it should. And then finally, the company we're in commercialization with now, I just said, okay, the device that we use for acute compartment syndrome really sucks. It's not accurate. I think the group out of Harborview identified that years ago, but nobody really acted on it. And so it was just a trip for me to go to the engineering school and ask if there was someone working on a better pressure sensor. And that's all it took. And they were like, if you go down to your engineering school, they've got tons of ideas with nothing clinical to apply to because they have no idea. And then I met a guy down there and said, yeah, I have all this stuff. What you can use that? Really? Wow, that's great. Let's get together. And we did. We wrote a little grant, and I'm used to writing grants. And it was funded for like $300,000, and that's all it took. And we have 5 spinoffs, like 5 startups came out of that one grant of $300,000. So I think it was frustration, but I think the people that are coming out now are better trained in understanding what commercialization means, what innovation means, and how to oil the channels to get that done faster.
Yeah, Ed, I really like your definitions of invention and innovation. I think it really is. It's right on. It also strikes me that the process is not that dissimilar from research. I mean, you can go to any conference and ask the attendees, what are your ideas for a research project? And they'll give you 5 to 10 good ideas. But the people that do something, as you said, using your terminology, and actually persist to do something are quite different. So I'm struck that persistence, both in innovation as well as in accomplishing meaningful clinical and basic research, is a major issue. And how do you identify people with that characteristic, or encourage people to get that characteristic?
Yeah, good question. I think there's an author named Angela Duckworth who's written a book called Grit, and she's basically made her whole career out of trying to identify people who can do it in many different levels, not just innovation. But if you read that book, it sort of gives you a back kind of drop to what you need. But truthfully, almost every orthopedic surgeon has grit. At least well, I can't say, the new generation, everyone says, oh, that new generation's soft. But I think the new generation has better education and makes up for what we had to do, 1 and 2 call for 5 years to get through our program. We had to have grit or we didn't get through. So I think everyone's got grit, everyone's got knowledge, they can do it. It's just, it's a question of whether you should do it. I mean, if you come out as an orthopedic surgeon, you should be concentrated on becoming an orthopedic surgeon, not in becoming an entrepreneur. I think you have this great gift given to you, the ability to practice medicine and treat people and make a difference in their life. And I think people think, oh, I'm graduated from orthopedic surgeon, I can now be an entrepreneur, but you really need to become a knowledge opinion leader. You need to be an expert before you can identify that subject matter that you can take to commercialization, or else you spin your wheels a lot. So I think, the innovation part, better education, better teaching process, but also there is a time factor where you need to have that grit and knowledge that you can bring something to an important thing to market,
Question that begs, I think you've just started and alluded to it, Ed, is, when is there a right time, or is it ever too late, right? So then, are you ever too young to begin, or are you ever too old, to think it's, oh, my time has passed? And I know it's maybe it's a question you can't answer, but I'm just, it's one of those things where I think when you look at various, if you look at Silicon Valley, there's a group of innovators. Now, the people that say you don't need school usually have billions of dollars. So I take a little bit of, I say, okay, well, if I had $2 billion, I think I'd read books for months too. But the reality is they're saying you don't, that the classic school system, you just have to get in and start doing, right? But I think you build a very compelling storyline that maybe you need a little bit of background knowledge and experience before you're going to be effective in this role. What's that balance?
Yeah, it's a good question. There's all these myths, especially from Silicon Valley, that there's the 19 to 24-year-olds have startups that are worth billions of dollars, right? But if you really look at the CEOs or the C-suite of those companies, there's someone sitting in there that's 55 years old. So I thought, okay, well, I'm getting to 55. I can be that person, right? So, but you got to realize it takes about 15 years to get any idea to market, commercialization, and make money. So if you're 65 years old, you must be really, really determined, like Harlan Sanders was when he started KFC. He was 65 when he started that. So that was so the people are older than you think that generate unicorn startups. It's just that all those kind of glorious stories of 20-year-olds, are what you see in the press. So there is no really bad age. You just got to realize if you're 75, you're not going to see it through. But otherwise, everyone has good ideas,
Hey, Ed, I want to kind of segue into the value discussion. So, as Mo knows, I'm always looking at what we've published recently, and this is from May 5th in the Journal of a study that came from Rick Matson's group in Seattle, assessing the value to the patient of new technologies in anatomic total shoulder arthroplasty. And what they did was they reviewed 114 manuscripts of so-called advances in total shoulder arthroplasty on the implant side, and then looked at collectively at the patient-oriented outcomes. And basically, even though every one of these sort of added expense to the process, there's no proven value to the patient with all that expense. So how can you, include that value thinking as you, the innovator, works towards improving the way things are done?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's a really brave article by Rick. I think that's a great thing to come to light, and I think everyone knew that in the background. That's why I said before, I'm going to make a pink plate instead of a blue plate, and I'm going to charge an extra $25 for it because it's much better. I think any product that you want to bring them to a market, the key to winning that commercialization is it has to have a winning picture for the 3 Ps. And the 3 Ps are the patient. So the patient's got to have better outcomes or a new outcome. For the physician, so the physician's got to like that product. He's got to be a champion of that product. He's got to make their work process easier or more efficient or more effective. And the payee, which is the one people forget about. And that's the back end where you try to sell something to an HMO, let's say, and you have to convince the chief financial officer why they should buy this product. And the value added kind of committee in your corporation or that analysis is really important. It's really important for society. And I think some of these new modifications of implants forget that you have to do those 3 Ps.
Yeah, that's great. That's great analysis, Ed. Thanks.
Ed, when you think about, okay, so, as a scientist, we say, okay, we know what success means, or at least we think we know what success means. It's, often related to grants and publications and your ability to educate. We know have a general idea what success means as an educator, but what's ultimately success as a surgeon innovator? So if someone is thinking about ideas and they say, okay, well, the only way I'm successful is if I launch a multinational company, and is that success, or are there a number of other reasons why someone would continue to explore and take the route of a surgeon innovator?
Yeah, a great question. I think your markers of success change as you go into innovation, and you're being judged by more than just your peer physicians. You're being judged by your primary funders, your friends and family, by your venture capitalists who've sunk money into your Series A, B, or C. You're being judged by society at large on how it changes processes. I think what the unspoken thing that people don't recognize is that you can't do it on your own. I mean, if you can't build a team, you're saying you don't win. So you make a point that, it's sort of like a certain scientist, both you and Marc, but certain scientists, the traditional like pitfalls were having an idea and getting money, which usually meant a grant to get it to proof of principle. There's many more pits of death in a commercialization process, and I think the number one that people don't recognize is building an efficient team, an effective team, and learning how that team changes over time. So a team for your innovation that was mostly made up of engineers and idea people then becomes a commercialization team with sellers and value add analysis people, regulatory. You wouldn't believe what regulatory means to bring your idea. I had no idea when I started that, to get a type 2 FDA device to market takes about $25 million. You kind of think, well, I can make a better toothbrush or I can make a better plate, and I just need $25 million. And that's the thing that people don't recognize, is that you have this changing landscape of people who evaluate you throughout the process. It's not like it is for a certain scientist where you just have to worry about your NIH peer review committee, right? So it's a much more dynamic and complex machine than you think.
Can you say a little bit more about the regulatory issues, Ed, and what kind of expertise do you need? How do you approach that? How do you get that large sum of money to go forward?
Okay, good. That's 2 good questions. So regulatory, anything that touches a patient's body and is meant for the medical side of use is going to have to go through some kind of regulatory, and there's different regulatory bodies in the world. FDA is the one in the States, CE Mark in Europe, Health Canada, etc. There is a number of rules and regulations that you have to go through that would make electronic health record look easy. So, I mean, at MyO1, which is, which you think, oh, that's a single device you're bringing out. How hard can that be? You just apply for FDA. I mean, we have 3 full-time people, 2 engineers that do, and 2 engineers that do regulatory only. It's a $350,000 a year cash burn for our company just to get through regulatory. And it's an ongoing process. It's not, you can undergo an FDA audit at the drop of a hat. They might say, okay, we're going to audit you today. You just have to be ready. So that regulatory expertise, if you don't have it in-house, you have to consult it out, but it's a huge burn. And you have to account for that, and you account for that by raising more money, So that's why you see people announcing, oh yeah, we've had a raise or a Series A or a Series B raise and got $10 million. Well, $10 million gets eaten up pretty quickly in a device coming through market. If you're doing a new plate or a heart valve, you need $90 million, right? So that's FDA type 3 device. So money, your CEO's full-time job, and that's why doctors can't do this alone. Your CEO's full-time job is raising money. And I'm definitely not that person. We have a great CEO, we have a great CTO, we have great people who work for our company, and really they're financially tuned way more than a doctor is. The doctor's like, oh, I want a nice plate I can put in my femur, and I want it to work. And these guys and girls are all about, making sure you have that money to make that plate. You can't do that as a doctor. That's just the basic line,
I'm sure you've pitched a lot, Ed. I mean, you've pitched a lot of people. What, in your opinion, is, it's easy to say single most, but I'm sure there's probably a few things. Like, what is it that ultimately gets a funder? Let's say it's first round angel investor, and we're saying angel. I'm guessing it's something under $1 million is angel. Maybe it's a different number, but whatever that number is, not like multiple millions. But getting that first investor in, what are they looking for?
Yeah, it's a good question. It depends on what type of investor you're dealing with. There's VCs are especially set up now for angel investing. It used to be not like that. The angel investor is looking at your team, basically. It's really hard to evaluate your product early on. I think that it's like a friends and family. So friends and family are behind you. So we raised all our money in friends and family, really. So there's people that knew you and believed in you, right? So that when you come to angel investing, it's really hard to evaluate. Even if they have an angel investor that's got 50 years experience in the medical, legal, or medical care field, they're going to have a hard time evaluating whether you can actually pull this off. And the only thing that gives them any kind of sense of positivity is if they evaluate you and say you have the grit or you have the ability to do this. And everyone's got a product that looks like it's going to make money, and whether it's worth the company looks like it's going to be worth $1 billion or $100 million, that they're really just looking at you as a person or as a team and seeing whether you can do it.
Yeah, that makes sense. So now maybe I'll take the prerogative of the last question, if that's okay, Marc. But it's one that I'm sure many listeners or viewers are thinking about is, what's the first thing I got to do? Like, okay, I'm compelled. Dr. Harvey has given me a good story. I want to do this. I've been thinking about it. What's the first thing you recommend they do? Okay,
so you can't do any of this without you have the idea. Everyone has the idea. The second valley of death is the team. So you need someone to help you do your project, and you need to build your team. And I've had my first startup was 10 years ago, and the team was the wrong team, and it blew up so hard that I was so badly burnt I didn't go back for 10 years. That's if you don't pick the team right, you're going nowhere. So you need to get one or two other people. The number of co-founders for VCs should be under 7. It should be over 1. We had 4 and went down to 3 with time, and that's probably the optimal number of founders that they like to deal with. They don't like too many opinions. They want a strong team. So I think the one thing you can do before anything else after your idea is find a team. And then the next step, the next valley of death is money, right? So I would encourage everyone, and there's such a great resource availability now that they used to not have, was that you get non-dilutive funding. So you start with grants, then you start with municipal, state, or federal grants for innovation. There's tons of them now. Every state is looking at this and throwing money at it. And it's out there. You don't have to go past friends and family for a couple of years, usually, if you can get involved with these processes at the government level.
Wonderful. Well, on that note, I would like to thank you again, Dr. Harvey, for spending some time with us, and always great to see you, Dr. Swinkowski. And I think we are at a point where we might be giving our final little cheers, and thanks again for your support.
I hope you don't have another evening like you had last night.
The one thing about being chair of surgery, the gift is that you will be basically your day is derailed on a daily basis. That's the gift. So I just, I expect it. It's been fun.
Well, enjoy. Thanks very much, Ed.
No problem. Thanks a lot for the invitation.
Yeah. Right, take care, Ed.
Bye-bye.